Hi, and welcome to Threat Track Essentials, where we take a look at some basic, everyday cybersecurity lessons that we can learn from this week's Threat Track stories. I'm here today with Jonathan Gonzalez. Thanks for being here, Jonathan. You were on the show today.
Thank you.
And thanks most of all for wearing the official Threat Track Essentials
Yes.
colored shirt, as Matt is in the background too. Let's talk about this week's stories, because they were a little unusual in that they may be about some things that the average person won't encounter. The first one being about some vulnerabilities in VxWorks, which is what?
So it's kind of like an operating system, like Windows or Linux or Mac, but it's used for things that require, kind of low latency, high availability, things like industrial control systems or like a patient's heart monitor, for example, or MRI machines. I think I use an example of the Mars rover as one of. So it's like the operating system that everybody uses that no one knows about.
So there were 11 serious vulnerabilities discovered with this operating system.
Correct. All 11 were actually just in the TCP/IP stack, which is kind of like a networking, the networking tools within the operating system. So some of them are very serious. Like someone could remotely, attack it and get into it and do, and then break into your network. So
You just take over the device. And some of these devices are in really critical areas in industry and medicine and things.
Correct. Yes. So it is very serious, and anybody that's managing this type of device should make sure that they're running a version that is patched.
So what is the lesson here? I mean, assuming that a lot of people out there may not be familiar with these devices or running them, is there a more general lesson that applies to everybody here?
I think it's the same, old lesson of patch your software.
Just keep your software up to date.
Right. The reason this companies release security patches is because something is wrong. So, leaving a device unpatched for 10 years, it's not the best approach here. Now, some of these devices that are running VxWorks might be very difficult to patch. For example, in a medical setting, you have to get approvals from the FDA and other government bodies. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just might take a little longer.
So it needs to be done even if it's difficult.
Right,
That's probably a good lesson for everybody, for any device that you have.
Right.
Let's talk about the story Matt brought us about APT15, which is a threat actor group and a new way of attacking systems that they have.
Right. So the group APT15, and for those who might not know, APT means advanced persistent threat, right? So the key word there is persistence. So while this new way to get in, this new backdoor that they have found, might be not big news for researchers, because people find new vulnerabilities all the time. It's about the fact that they're creating this software that allows them to stay in this networks and continue to do things within it, unpatch, and sometimes if it's not monitored well for long periods of time. The scary thing is that some of this, at least a specific threat group, are attacking or spying on government officials from different countries.
So that's where the advanced part comes in. They're a very high-end group attacking very high-end targets.
They're very specific, and they, I'm sure they have their reasons. And again, same guy from government X is going to use the same systems that we might use, in a corporation. So everywhere we just have to be aware that things are vulnerable, and these backdoors need to be protected.
And these groups are always, just like any hackers, they're always finding new ways to get in.
Yes.
They're always finding new ways to attack. So what does that mean to us?
It just means that we have to also be on top of, learning new things and researching it. So, it's, what is the saying, the cat and mouse game, right? It's, they'll keep finding new things. We also need to be aware that is possible, and that we have to keep on top of it. And
so always be on your toes and look for the latest patches and vulnerabilities in devices or software that you may have.
Correct.
Let's talk about the other story where you brought to us about LibreOffice, which is what?
So LibreOffice is like an alternative open source kind of word processing, kind of like Microsoft Office. They have other tools like for slides and spreadsheets and things like that. And it's very popular for people that maybe don't want to spend the money on Office or just wanted an alternative. And in this case, it's very easy for an attacker to send a malicious Word document that has this vulnerability.
Right.
Oh.
There's a way to tell where the vulnerability is, right? It's in another portion of the software called Logo.
So yeah, so within the application, there is, I guess, a tool built in called Libre Logo, and if this is installed as part of your installation, then you're kind of vulnerable. The best advice is, if you do, then maybe try to remove it. If you're not sure how to do that, I believe you can install a version without it. So maybe uninstall it when you have it installed.
So uninstall it and install it without Logo. That's the way to do it.
That might be one way to approach it. And I think we talked about it in the main show, but like, for the most part, most people don't need that specific functionality, so it makes sense to not have it.
So only install portions of software what you need, especially with open source software, right? Because you may not know where the origin of it is and what parts are in there.
Yeah, and I mean, we have a similar things that happen in like macros in Office, and actually LibreOffice also allows macros, but just be aware that things can run beyond just the thing that you want, which is just a word processing, right?
So like macros are like is like a tool that runs basically a script or a set of tasks like in a Word document.
Right.
This software also has something similar, and you just have to be aware of what it's actually running, because what it's running could be dangerous.
Correct. So yeah.
Well, thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, definitely.
That's it for this week's Threat Track Essentials. As always, if you want to know more about any of these stories, you can take a deeper dive by clicking on the playlist below. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.